Okay, welcome to the Philosophy Club, back here in sleepy Batet in the middle of France, geographical centre, and I'm pleased to say hello to my friends here and online. I'm going to do a little survey of what's been going on this week first, which is my normal practice. We've had a beautiful summer day today, so we're having throwbacks to midsummer. I quite like this autumnal shift because we get little foretastes of winter. We've had some pretty strong rain, and then we have sudden day of sunshine and warmth, which is what I call like a Scottish summer day. It's as warm today as it is on a hot day in the Scottish summer. So thank you for the weather gods. And yes, so what have we been up to? Well, I've been carrying on with my daily meditation practice and prayers, and as people know, I think if you've watched this before, I always use this daily calendar of sages and saints, which of course everyone should have a copy of. It's absolutely unique. There is no such thing in the world apart from this, which is ridiculous, but hey, you've got to start somewhere. And because up until recently, people thought in terms of their own faith or their own ideology and their own religion, and it was the only or the best one, and everyone else was to be dominated or, transformed or whatever. And now we're beginning to realise that we're living together on a small planet, and we have to learn to live with each other, whatever our colour or religion or ideology or faith. And so this is the guidebook. And it has Montségur on the cover, for those that know. The Cathar Castle, which was the last place that held out during the Cathar pogroms, which the Roman Catholics did, sadly, and killed and massacred a lot of people. So it's sort of symbolically saying, let's live, even if we're Catholics or Cathars, let's learn to live in peace and just study each other's traditions. So and we've had some interesting ones that have come up of late. I always enjoy going through them each day because you get, different ones that you didn't know about and you've forgotten. And they only come around once a year, so each day is a whole, it's difficult to remember them all. And so that was fun. The other thing I want to share is that, this is quite important really, I've been watching this DVD, which I strongly recommend to everyone. I want to give it to all my friends. It's called The Oak Tree, Le Chêne. It's in French. It's made by a French film director. And it is the most incredible nature film I've ever watched in my life. As a Druid, of course, we love oak trees. The word Druid means a keeper of the oak or knower of the oak. The oak tree's got the same name as Dharma because it's the constancy, the strongest tree in the forest, and it protects many creatures and animals. Cue the animal. And so what this film crew have done is they've installed micro cameras all over the oak tree, up in the branches and even in the root systems, and they've watched for a whole year as the oak goes through, spring, summer, autumn, winter, and what happens to the lives of the creatures. And it's incredible because, for instance, I've learned more about mice than I've ever known before, because it films the mice who are in the burrows under the oak roots and their lives. They're incredible little creatures that come out and are looking for whatever they can get hold of, acorns normally. And then it's got squirrels in it, and there's some beautiful, almost syncopated dance sequences in the film where the squirrel will go up and look like that, and then you see like 3 or 4 mice doing exactly the same. There's all kinds of birds who are also doing these syncopated rhythmic moves, all different kinds of birds with their nests up in the branches, and there's wild boar that come and they like to scratch against the oak trunk, and deer pop past. It's just like, I thought at first, oh God, a nature film, how boring, it's going to be tedious, I'll give it 10 minutes. But it's gripping because everything is constantly changing and it's so well done. And then there are insects, all kinds of different insects. He films that with micro precision. I don't know how it was filmed. The detail is incredible. And of course, when the thunder and lightning come, all the little creatures run into their burrows and are terrified. And he films the lightning storm, and it's fantastic. And that's what Tyrannus, the god of this area, was famous for, the oak trees and the thunder and lightning. He was the god of the old Celts or Gauls who lived here. Now I researched where it was filmed because I was thinking this is amazing. And it's really just up the road. This was filmed in the forest called Solange, which is on the way to Chambord. There's a famous chateau there on the way to the Loire. It's about an hour's drive from here. And the landscape is very similar to parts of La Creuse. And so we have oak trees around here that the same kind of amount of life will be in. And also it's got thrilling moments when the owl tries to catch a smaller bird, and the eagle swoops and tries to chase after a bird. And then at one point, one of the scariest moments is when a snake appears and is slithering up to get in the nest of the bird where the young are in the spring, little baby birds, and the snake is going up to get them. But just as it's about to pounce, the branch it's on gives way and it falls into the lake, so the birds are okay. So I think it's just a really beautiful film, and it made me realise the other thing about Druids and the oak tree's symbolism and importance. I've always associated that with the capacity to see Dharma, to see that which is truly important and enduring in life. But I think the other thing about the oak is it's a shelter for so many life forms. And I think that, that's the other thing about Druids and Druidry, is that they're supposed to be shelters for the community, for the assembly of seekers of truth. And I hope I can live up to that, because it's pretty stupendous, these oak trees, what they do, and how many creatures. This particular oak is like 1,000 years old. They live to really ancient ages. I'm not sure I'll make 1,000, but I'll have a go. Be fun, because then I can see how much the world improves during my watch. But so that's one thing I've been doing, which I want to share, and I recommend people get Le Chêne. It's available on the internet, and if you happen to live in France, you can get it from your library. You can order it, because in France they have a very civilized library system. It's by Laurent Charbonnier and Michel Seydoux, are the two named filmmakers. So, just be aware of what nature is doing, its incredible complexity and beauty. And this is why I'm interested in a green perspective on politics and events and life, because animals are part of our lives. And I think the other thing I learned from the film is how much the ecosystem is all interconnected. Each little creature kind of, is part of a web of interdependence. And that's what life is. It's that web of interdependence. And if we break that, we all die, So, okay, now, other things. Bishy, can I just move, do you mind? Because I'm reading from that book. Can you have her on your lap? If you stroke her, she'll stay. Yeah, put her on your lap. Okay. So I've been involved with the World Peace Gardens Network, which is ongoing, and that's extension from the oak tree. We're trying to get these World Peace Gardens around the planet, and there's a group of us, and we meet up once a month, and we've been having some great discussions. And if you know of anyone with a beautiful garden, they want to declare a World Peace Garden, please get in touch. It doesn't have to be big, it can be small. It's the intention that matters. We want to turn the world into a patchwork of peace gardens. I'd like to find out where this oak tree was filmed and have that declared a World Peace Garden, because it's so beautiful. It's near a lake, and so there's always ducks and flying birds coming in to the lake. And because it's so brilliantly filmed, you see the micro depths of their trajectories and their landing techniques, and each bird is different. Incredible intelligence in nature. So I've been involved with that, and the other thing I want to share is I've been a fan of the Institute of Noetic Sciences in America for a long time, founded by Edgar Mitchell, the pilot who was part of the Apollo program, went to the moon and back, and he was transformed by his experience of being out in space, and he realised we live on a precious little planet, and we have to end our wars and nuclear weapons and ecological destruction. And he realised that he had a kind of mystical experience up on the Apollo, where he was told, that he had to go back and work for planetary enlightenment and upliftment. Now, he was a scientist, so he thought the best thing I can do is create some centre or institute which compares science and spirituality, because the planet at the moment has got a broken conversation around this. People are either a scientist or a spiritual person, and they hardly talk to each other. So this Institute of Noetic Sciences was created. I've been a member on and off for years, and it's based in California. What is Noetic Sciences? It's using the term of Aristotle. Noetic means spiritual or intellectual. The nous is Aristotle's word for the divine mind inside us, the intellect. And that survives after death, according to Aristotle. It's the only part of us which does. It's the kind of deepest thinking mind that we have, which is immortal. Anyway, this film was brilliant, and it's just been released. It's made by a film director, and we got a preview. And it's about the discovery that the heart has a form of intelligence, that divine mind, that nous, doesn't just live in the brain, as neurologists and neuropsychologists thought. It also lives in the heart, and the heart has a network of nerves, neurons, and there seems to be what we call psychic powers and premonitions and hunches and intuition seem to have something to do with the heart, and they're beginning to prove this physiologically. I think the heart's timing is in a different domain than conventional, rational, linear time. It thinks in simultaneities, synchronicities, and so it looks like God consciousness also dwells in the heart. And this film is about that. It's brilliantly made. It's a little documentary. It's not yet on general release, but I had a preview, and I want to commend the filmmakers. It's called The Heart Revolution, and it'll be out, sometime in the next few months. Worth seeing. And also, I just want to say the other thing I've been working on is my 99 Names of Peace book, of course. Each day I spend a few hours on that, at least 3 or 4 or 5, and going through all the different languages. And I've just done Marathi, which is a language of Maharashtra in west central India, which is where Bombay is, and it's got 93 million speakers, and it's descended in parallel to Sanskrit, and it's got some amazing words, and it's similar to Sanskrit but not completely, and similar to Hindi. It's got its own thing. And I discovered the word for an intellectual there in Marathi is from the same root as buddhi, which is intellect. I've always told my Buddhist friends that the word Buddha means just intellect, intellectual. Buddhi is the word for cosmic intellect or enlightened intellect. And so their word for an intellectual is simply like I think it's a bodhkaya, a bodhkaula. But it comes from the same root. Someone who's activated their buddhi nature, which is their intellect. That's an intellectual. So actually, to be a Buddhist really is just to be an intellectual. This is my argument. To activate that buddhi is something we should all do, whether we're Christian, whatever our cultural background, right? And that would be nice. That's what I call meta Mahayana Buddhism. That's the kind I believe in, which is you activate the buddhi nature in all the traditions. in all the boxes on the periodic table, because it's there as our birthright. So that's a little summary, and also the Lex in Essentium, where people are trying to abolish war as not fit for purpose because it damages non-combatants. I agree with that, and you know, that's going on in Ireland. Our website has now got some of the talks on there, which was excellent as its launch on International Peace Day, 21st of September. And the International Delphic Academy work is progressing, still doing that. So, what else? Yes, and oh, final thing. In my 99 Names of Peace, I've got many projects which I'm listing, 99 projects. And one of them is to do with the Astrology of Peace. Now, I'm someone that in my youth never took astrology seriously. I thought that's pseudoscience, you know, I thought that's ridiculous. I then met some friends and had some life adventures and realised some very intelligent people believe in astrology. I met some people that could do it, and you know, professionally, and I learned to have more respect for it. And I felt, you know, I could see it's really complicated and you need very good maths. I mean, now you can do it on a computer, but back in those days it's mostly by hand. And it's a very interesting way of getting an overview of situations and people. And there are all different kinds of astrology traditions. So I looked into it over the course of the last 20 years. I have like a week or two. I did a course on it with a famous German astrologer last summer, which was interesting, a Jungian. And I think in my studies of Carl Jung, I grew more respectful of astrology. And I've come to the view that the astrological signs, divisions, planets are archetypes which reflect the human psyche and ultimately reflect maybe the divine mind. There's an inner and outer correlation, because if the archetypes that we can inhabit, like let's say Mars, you know, we can become a martial person and do martial arts and join the army, well, that's a sort of archetype that's available to us, and maybe we really get into that, or we might do the Venus thing and become really loving and peaceful, and much prefer that. I think these are archetypes that we go through, possibly during many lifetimes. As a Platonist, plug for the Plato Dictionary, definitely worth getting. You know, I do believe reincarnation makes most sense if you take an overview of human life and evolution, because there's too much to learn in any one lifetime. It'd be really mean of God to give us this complicated mind and this beautiful planet and then just say, well, you just get a few decades. It's not possible. It's like getting a ticket to the Bodleian Library and they throw you out after a couple of hours. That would be mean, right? So anyway, okay, fast forward. I've invented a thing called the Astrology of Peace as my project. Nobody's thought of this or done it. I'm suggesting that we get a group of the world's best astrologers and apply to conflicts like Israel, Gaza, Ukraine, Russia, and do the astrological charts of the main protagonists, see why they're clashing, because it'll be in the charts. Look at the fatal events like October 7th, 2023, what happened at that exact moment. It will show up in the astrology charts. And then ask our learned astrologers to say, is there any way forward here? What can synthesize these clashing temperaments and so on? And I bet you it will exist. They will be able to find a path. And since nothing else is working, let's try Astrology of Peace. And so I've been researching in history, and some of the greatest emperors, I mean, Kepler, the great planetary scientist whose discovery of the orbits inspired Newton's Principia Mathematica, Kepler was officially the astrologer to the Holy Roman Emperor. And his job was to tell the emperor when it was, you know, give a prognosis as to whether this or that was a good decision to take. In those days, emperors had astrologers, and kings did too. And so why shouldn't we nowadays in our world? They mostly gave information about battles when it was good to launch, and that's kind of military astrology is still being done. Hitler used it. It was used by the Hindu fascist movement, the RSS, to time the destruction of a Muslim mosque in India. They used astrology to say when is the maximum blow. So people are using that stuff. Even Reagan used astrology, President Reagan, and Churchill as well, I think. So let's use it for peace. And I was inspired by this man, King Alfonso X of Spain, the wise king, he's called, El Sabio, who was fascinated by astrology. And he had learned astrologers at his court who were Muslims, Jews and Christians. And he sponsored all these books and translations from Arabic into Latin and Hebrew. And he knew as the king that astrology is kind of important. And also, so did Frederick II, the Holy Roman Emperor in Sicily, one of the great intellectuals of his day, who also had Michael Scott at his court, the great Scottish polymath and intellectual and philosopher, who studied at Durham School, I've discovered. Durham Cathedral had a school before it had a university, and he was a student there. And he was an astrologer at the court of Frederick II as well. So I've got respect. And also, some of you know I'm a fan of Dr. John Dee, who was the astrologer to Queen Elizabeth I and fixed her coronation. And he was a polymath and a magus and a mathematician from Cambridge University, who coined the phrase the British Empire. So these astrologers are quite important, I think. Let's get them doing peace. So if you're an astrologer out there and you hear this, please get in touch and we'll talk about it, because, you know, it's important. Okay, thank you. That's where I'm at. Okay, any comments or questions at this point before we move on?
It's perhaps a question I could keep for when we're doing the table. But some more details about the Metamaya?
The Mahayana thing, yes. Good question, that. So Mahayana is the great vehicle. Buddhism began with this prince teaching individuals one by one how to reach a state of inner peace, nirvana. And he gave them certain techniques, the Eightfold Path and meditation techniques and all kinds of things, which is still taught. It was written down in the Pali texts, and they work. However, that was 2,500 years ago. And over the course of about 500 years, after Buddha came and went, his descendants decided it needed to be upgraded, because that teaching of sort of one by one quiescent nirvana experience wasn't reaching enough people quickly enough to really help heal the world, because people were so full of aggression, greed and so on. So they came up with this idea of Mahayana, which is the great vehicle, where they said that we should work not just for our own personal enlightenment, but our collective enlightenment as a planet. That means the great vehicle. So you do your meditation practice, which I do daily, not just for myself, but for the whole of humanity. And according to the heart research, as you quiet your heart and still, you literally plug into other people around the planet that are doing the same. So in deep meditation and prayer, you're literally communing with everyone else doing the same thing. That's great. That's Mahayana, right? And it was particularly adapted in Tibet, which is where I, fell in love with it all those years ago. But then there's I think nowadays we have a need for something even more, which is, even the Mahayana is too slow. We don't have time to get everyone to, because it's really complicated. There's huge numbers of texts. You have to study for years under a lama and wear robes and, very strict rules and etc., etc. But I don't think the planet's got enough time for that. So I want to speed it up, and that's why I've coined this phrase. With Gary Snyder, I think he invented it. I'm just borrowing it. The Mata Mahayana, which is, let's have a really super huge vehicle, right? Which is all humanity. So what I'm saying, I don't think, Gary's a poet, I don't think I articulated it quite as I'm doing, that within all the traditions, say of the periodic table, there are enlightenment vehicles. To use sci-fi terminology, there are pods that can get us off, out of the madness. So if you practice as a Jewish Hasid or Kabbalist, you can reach enlightenment as much as if you become a Buddhist, or if you practice as a Sufi and you go into Islamic spiritual depths, you can reach enlightenment. So I think these are all enlightenment vehicles. If you're a Christian, you can stay a Roman Catholic or a Protestant. It's whether you perfect the teachings that are there, I think, or you join a new religious movement, or you just stay a humanist and study, classical philosophy and Plato and whatever. I mean, you can be a Kantian. I think all of these are potential enlightenment insights. And the job of Metta Mahayana is to see how they all fit together and are compatible with one another. So that's really what I mean by Metta Mahayana. It's a sort of a new approach to Buddhism. And I maintain that is also leaning towards Maitreya, who's the coming Buddha. Because according to all the Buddhas and Buddhist texts, Gautama Buddha came at a certain time in history, and it was needed then, that teaching, which stressed suffering and how to avoid it. The next Buddha will be called Maitreya, and he will stress friendship and love and altruism instead of suffering. He'll make the Buddha's teachings more like friendly and attractive, and he will be the next Buddha. Now, every Buddhist Lama I've ever met, I've asked, where's Maitreya, when's he coming? And they've all given different answers. I knew a chap called Benjamin Krem, who lived in London, who said he was in East London, and he used to channel him. But he never came forward, So I take the view that, and Krishnamurti was supposed to be the Maitreya, he was given the job. But and there are several people around on the planet now, being Maitreya. So I'm saying let's all work together and use Metta Mahayana to advance collective enlightenment, global enlightenment, and that way we can have fun with all the boxes, and not get obsessed with any one of them. So anyway, that's what it means.
Thank you.
Right, thanks for the question, yeah. Any other questions? If not, we'll move on. Are you happy to move on? We'll move on to the periodic table itself then, okay? Right, so this is the time of the evening when we're going to choose a box each. Right. So you cheated because you already chose one, but you get a second go. So Armel, have you chosen one
Yes.
tonight? Which one do you want?
About the 35, which is a primal Central Asian, Turkish and Mongolian.
Okay, number 35, great. Good choice. Thank you. And Rasheen, which one have you chosen?
Shamanism.
The very first?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And your second choice, you get a second one.
Yep. I was intrigued by which one again? It was a prime one as well. Boom.
Oh, the bottom one. Okay. Number 19. Right. Excellent.
What is the meaning of bone?
We'll come to that shortly.
Okay.
It's the pagan Tibetan Buddhist tradition. We'll come to that. Yeah. Well, we better start with number one. I tend to do them in chronological sequence, right? So we'll start with number one, shamanism. And this is a general catch-all phrase, really. It first arose in Central Asia, in fact, in number 35, which we'll look at in a minute. I use the term in the way that Mircea Eliade used it in his epic book, Shamanism, to mean a primal religious practitioner. When I was in Ljubljana last, I went to an exhibition at the Museum of Ethnology on shamanism, which was all objects from St. Petersburg Museum, because in Russia they really, in Tsarist Russia as well, in the beginning, they really got interested in the religions of Central Asia, and they were actually sent out teams with cameras and photographs to watch shamans doing their rituals. What does a shaman do? Well, is the person in the village or tribe that communicates between humans and the gods, and has a certain paraphernalia to do that, usually involving a drum, rhythmically struck, which puts you into a semi-trance state. And that's probably the first musical instrument our ancestors made. And for tens of thousands of years, we would have been in caves with flickering flames, listening to the shaman's drum, going on out-of-body experiences. So what the shaman does has learned to navigate into what we could call the astral realm, learn to leave their body and travel. And in those days, of course, the gods were thought of in animal form. So they'd be encountering animal spirits and beneficent ones, occasionally dark ones. And if you're interested, look at the book by Mircea Eliade, if you've not done so, on shamanism, because he based it on what was then known. It was written in the 1950s, but it's still the most important source book for this. They functioned as we could call them the counsellors or psychotherapists of the village. So if somebody came along with some kind of neurosis or mental illness or deep grief or something, they would go on journeys and find the cause of it. And it would work. This is what's extraordinary. They were also the people in charge of the psychedelic potions which were administered by the tribe at the right time to the right initiates, and also ran the initiations for the community. And we think that our ancestors invented the use of psychedelics, as many scholars have discovered. I mean, this goes a long way back. So, tobacco is a shamanic tool, often in Latin America, South America. Shamans use tobacco judiciously and magically, because it has an ability to slightly put you out of your body if used correctly. And if you mix it with other herbs, it has a stronger effect. And it was part of a sacred ritual that the American Indian tribes do, which I've participated in, whereby white buffalo calf woman brought tobacco to the tribe as part of our salvation. So it's a very, very sacred thing. They also had knowledge of the plants. So the shamans of Central America, the forests of the Amazon, they know how to heal people with using which plants. And I once heard an amazing lecture in Sopron in Hungary by the nephew of a famous scientist in Brazil, who had gone to the Amazon and interviewed shamans and said, what are your most important healing herbs? He was a professor of pharmacology at the university in Brazil. And they told him 500 plants that cure everything, they said. And they let him take cuttings back to his greenhouse in the university. He grew them, and then he analysed their contents so he could explain why they're doing this stuff. He couldn't explain everything, of course, but they had seemingly magical powers. And it was called the living pharmacy. He discovered, using these 500 plants, you could cure 99.9% of Brazilian illnesses, mental, physical, every type. And the government sponsored these living pharmacies to be replicated in all the cities of Brazil. This is back in the 80s and 90s. And he was given the equivalent of a knighthood by the Brazilian government. I think that is such an important program. And that was the shamanic knowledge, right? I believe that knowledge could be replicated in Britain. We could ask the kind of local